Hello students. Hope you all are having a very good day. So the topic of today's online session is basic principles and procedures of laboratory. The basic principles and procedure of laboratory topic comes under the subject basic concepts of medical laboratory technology. So the basic concepts of medical laboratory technology covers the basic principles and procedures that are used in the laboratory. We'll be discussing in this section about the principles of the laboratory, that how one must be there in the laboratory, how one must be functioning in the laboratory, what are the different laboratory procedures that are used, what are the lab procedures that are used, what are the principles, etc. So, without delaying, let's start today's session. First of all, what are lab procedures? So, a medical lab procedure is a medical procedure, we can say, which involves testing of sample of blood, urine, or other substances from the body. These tests can help determine a diagnosis, plan treatment, or check to see if the treatment is working or monitor the disease over time. Alright, so a technician or a doctor analyzes the test samples to see if the results fall within the normal range or not. These tests use a range because what is normal differs from person to person. Many factors also affect the test results. These includes the gender, the age, the race, or what a person eats and drinks and what medicines he is taking, and how well you are following the pre-test instructions. So, laboratory tests are often part of a routine checkup to look for the changes in the health. They also help the doctors to diagnose the medical conditions, plan or evaluate treatments, and monitor the disease. So, we can say that laboratory procedure is any procedure which involves testing or manipulating a sample of blood, urine, or other body substances in a laboratory settings. So these are detailed documents, checklists, or guidelines which instruct you how to safely carry out an action in a laboratory environment. These are the set of instructions that one can follow correctly, consistently, and effectively carry out a specific action every time whenever it is required. Now, talking about the general laboratory procedures. So general laboratory procedure include, first of all, deciding which procedure you are documenting. As I told you that it is a documentation of different actions or checklists or guidelines that you are uh, performing in the laboratory. So first of all, you have to decide that which procedure you are documenting. Alright. Secondly, to identify the roles and responsibilities. This is very important. This is very basic, to identify each and every person's role and responsibilities very clearly, so that the person is also clear about his duties and responsibilities, as well as the higher staff or management of the laboratory or the management of hospital is also clear about his roles and responsibilities, and no fussiness or confusion is created. Second is detail what can go wrong. So you have to make a detail that while applying this procedure or while performing this procedure, what all errors or what all manipulations can a person reach, so that he can get a clear idea that how to rectify these errors. Have a clear method for monitoring and auditing. So you have to have a clear method for monitoring and auditing, because in the laboratory, anytime a monitoring or auditing can be performed, and a laboratory must be always proper in that monitoring and auditing. So to maintain that, you should have a clear method. Set guidelines for handling materials. So there should be a perfect guidelines that are set for handling the material, so that the shelf life of the materials or the equipments or the instruments is also increased, and as well as a proper communication and the proper atmosphere in the laboratory is maintained. All right, moving on. Now, what are the basic principles of laboratories? We'll be discussing about the basic principles of the laboratory. Alright. The clinical and principal workers are equally at risk of acquiring transmission disease through the patient test sample. So laboratory work is an essential part of the diagnosis, and it often accounts for a significant proportion of maintaining the safety in the laboratory. So uh, you have to provide an easy to use reference in the laboratory so that proper decorum is maintained in the laboratory. Alright. So first of all, the first point that I read for you was the clinical and principal workers are equally at risk of acquiring transmission diseases through the patient or through the test sample. So every person should be maintaining the safety precautions, should always be taking the safety precautions, as the clinical and principal workers both are at equal risk. Secondly, disinfect the working benches and as far as possible autoclave various glasswares used in the laboratory. So safety purposes comes first. Why? Because everyone is involved in the laboratory operation from the highest administrative level to the individual level, and it must be safety minded. So safety awareness can become part of everyone's habit only if the safety is discussed repeatedly, and only if the senior and responsible staff demonstrates a senior and sincere and continuing interest in the safety. So, you should be alert to unsafe conditions and call attention to them so that the corrections can be made as soon as possible. So, every laboratory worker has basic responsibility to himself or herself and colleagues to plan and execute laboratory operation in a safe manner. So, for that, disinfection of the working benches should be done like regularly at the start of the work and while ending the work both. The glasswares that are used in the laboratory must be autoclaved also. Secondly, work scientifically and with complete honesty. So while working in the laboratory, it is very much required that the person must work with scientific approach and complete honesty should be carried out. Promote healthcare and the prevention and control of disease. The person working in the laboratory must be promoting the healthcare and should be working towards the prevention and control of disease, because laboratory is at high risk of spreading the infection. So to stop the infection, this is the primary duty of the laboratory workers or the laboratory personnel that are working in the laboratory to the maintain the infection control. All right. Do not measure your professional skills or knowledge for personal gains. So this is the ethics. This also comes into the ethics of the laboratory personnel, that whatever professional skill or knowledge you have, you should not be using it for the personal gain. Secondly, to develop understanding of the healthy living. So the person must be developing the understanding of the healthy living. For that, good nutrition is required, daily exercise is required, and adequate sleep is also required. All these factors are the foundation of healthy living. If you want a healthy, fit body, then you have to maintain the healthy lifestyle, which will keep you fit, energetic, and which will also reduce the risk of getting disease. So, according to WHO, also, healthy living is a way of living which helps you enjoy more aspects of your life. For that, good nutrition is required. The food you have to take, the quality should be good, and the nutrition you are taking from that food should be analyzed by you. You have to exercise daily, and adequate sleep is also required. Now, what are laboratory hazards? So, hazard is anything which may cause any injury, harm, or damage to the person. It can also danger or risk the persons working in laboratory. So, whatever hazard, whatever kind of injury or damage that may arise while working in the laboratory comes under laboratory hazard. So, there are different types of laboratory hazard. First one is the physical hazard. So, physical hazard can be due to any kind of fire, injury, noise, radiation, high voltage operators, or machinery with the moving parts. So physical hazard is a kind of hazard that a person gets physically from the thing, from the mechanical things or the things like physical. Alright. Next is the chemical hazard. So chemical hazard is the kind of hazard which a person is having, or the hazard which is occurring due to the misuse or use or abusive use of the chemicals, or the mishandling of the chemicals, such as the chemicals may be corrosive, flammable, toxic, carcinogenic, poisonous, or explosive. So these kind of chemicals are capable of causing damage and injury to the person, all right, or the body part of the person in which they have been spilled. So the chemicals must be handled in the laboratory very carefully. Third type of hazard is a biological hazard that can be caused by the pathogenic microorganism, animals, biological tissues, blood, and other body fluid. All right. So any kind of hazard that is caused by any kind of bacteria, virus, protozoa, fungi, animal, or biological tissues, or the spilling or the misuse of any kind of, or mishandling of any kind of sample comes under the biological hazard. Now, what are the chemical safety rules that you have to be like you that you have to carry out every time while working in the laboratory? First of all, never put your face near opening of a container which holds a chemical. So, a person should always bear it in mind that a container should not be checked by keeping it very close, by keeping your face very close to it, because the chemical may be corrosive or carcinogenic. It may be spill on your face or other body parts, or some of the times the gases are very like poisonous that a chemical may hold. So you should never put your face near the opening of any kind of container. Never touch, taste, or smell anything unless instructed by your head. So while working in the laboratory, the instruction of head is very important. One must always bear in mind the instructions that is given by the head of the laboratory. So you should never touch, taste, or smell anything unless it is instructed by your head. When pouring, pour over the sink. When pouring the chemicals, it is advisable that you should pour the chemicals over the sink so as it will not spill onto you or onto the the floor of the laboratory also. Use care while working with acids and bases. So you have to give careful attempts while you're working with the acids and bases in the laboratory. When mixing acids with water, pour acid into the water slowly. When you are mixing the acid with the water, you have to pour the acid slowly into the water. It should never be done that water will be added to the acid. Always you have to pour the acid into water, that too very slowly. Now talking about the fire safety. So what is fire safety? So the safety measures that you are taking for preventing for any kind of fire, for preventing from any kind of fire comes under the fire safety. So whenever you see this symbol of fire safety, you will know that you are working with fire. Never use and source of fire without wearing the safety goggles. Never heat anything, particularly chemicals, unless you are instructed to do so. Never heat anything in a closed container, and never reach across a flame. So to avoid the fire to like spread, you should never heat anything in a closed container. You should not be reaching across the flame, and you should heat the particular chemicals unless you are instructed to do so. Measuring and dispensing liquids. So the equipment you should choose to measure out liquids depends upon the volume to be dispensed, the accuracy that is required, and number of the times the job has to be repeated. Conical flasks, beakers, measuring cylinders, and volumetric flasks measure the volume of liquid contained in them. Alright, the volume that we take into them, while burettes, pipettes, pipettas, syringes, and micro syringes mostly measure the volume delivered from them. Alright, so you have to always keep in mind that which kind of equipment has to be used for what kind of what kind of action. So that's all about the basic principle and procedures of laboratory. Hope this is clear to you. Thank you for joining, students.